making sure that everyone gets a good look at this live today. I'm just making sure it is going up everywhere that it should. Okay, so what have we got this week? So Robodebt has just rolled itself up after 9 weeks of hearings. What did we learn, and what do we hope is the outcome of Robodebt? After hearing many submissions, I think that criminal charges should be on the forefront of that. But we're going to talk about that more later. What was Susan Lee's challenge this week in Parliament? What the Aussie dollar drop means for the economy? The $5 banknote response. Now, this is going to be a response from England. I think it's going to be super important to see how that one goes. Philip Lowe's half-price home loan that he really didn't need. Keeping away from Abbott's rhetoric. The biggest scandal that isn't being spoken about with John Barilaro. The monster no-show for New South Wales. Hillsong's review of fraud. Is Josh Frydenberg planned to run again? The amazing what ifs. Yeah, he still has ambitions to be Prime Minister. Sadly, well, it's good for the left, but sadly for his own personal ambitions, I don't think not only not winning your own seat, but not being able to be liked anywhere really, I think that might be a bad idea. ALP and the Greens have come together for a momentous collaboration on a 4-day work week. And that's about everything that we're going to feature tonight. So stay tuned in and hope you enjoy the show. Please like, share, and comment. Those comments really need to come through to trick the algorithm into making sure more people see the content. Okay, first up, we're going to talk about Robodebt. Now, for the past few weeks, we have been discussing Robodebt as a first intro. The reason for that is because mainstream media largely ignores the overwhelming problems with Robodebt and exactly what it did. Robodebt didn't just have this part where they were like, oh, we're going to introduce this. And they didn't really consult the public about it. They didn't go to Parliament to change any laws. What they did was they took existing kind of parts of what was already there and expanded it. And the way that they expanded it wasn't legal. So you get that part right. And not only wasn't Robodebt legal, but just take a listen to what the stuff that we've learned from 9 weeks to this. It's amazing that major networks have chosen to shun this type of reporting. One of them includes insiders. Now, as disgraceful as what that is, I think an even more upsetting moment is to understand that we are entitled to this factual wrap-up and subsequent dealing in what happens with Robodebt. Because make no mistakes, conservatives aren't done with this program. They're just trying to find a way to make it legal to punish the poor. Understand that is like the conservative goal here. They're not there to ensure that we are protected and safe, as a lower income group. No, the intent is purely to keep you poor, and not only keep you poor, but attack you for being that very demographic. But understand that if you have 3 million in super, you can't touch that. You can't touch the top 1%, but you absolutely can touch everybody else. And I think that there showed Conservatives in the same week as hearing a Robodebt, they're screaming about their friends that have got 3 million in super. Outrageous. Okay, so here we go with our first link of the evening. So this is ABC's basic wrap-up. Pity they didn't do it on the news. For 9 weeks, a Brisbane hotel ballroom has been the stage for a royal commission into the Robodebt scheme. Now, I understand that even the picking of the place was controversial from the start because it had to have a lot of things involved, like who would be appearing, where they would be appearing from. There are a lot of fly-in, fly-outs to this. It's been no waltz for more than 100 witnesses, including 2 former prime ministers. They were questioned forensically for hours, but predominantly they gave answers of, I don't know, I don't recall, and I didn't think it was illegal, despite evidence that shows quite the contrary. Okay, underneath the Robodebt scheme, the Commonwealth unlawfully accused hundreds and thousands of welfare recipients from 2015 to 2019 of owing the government money. Now, could you imagine if you did this to rich people? Like, take the 30,000 feet view as if you did this to rich people. Understanding fundamentally that they are mad about slightly going after people on 3 million, like slightly, money that they won't even miss. But you do this to poor people where they actually die, suddenly that's not fair, which is outrageous to begin with. So, okay, an algorithm matched recipients' reported earnings with the averaged income data from the tax office to allege overpayments with little to no human oversight. Keep in mind that there was testimony given that they also took off the phone number to contact Centrelink because they wanted people to engage in online. So this meant very vulnerable people had no way of engaging the issues around this debt. But the calculation method was fundamentally flawed. Social Security welfare payments are based on fortnightly earnings, which tend to fluctuate. Aged care pensioner Rosemary Gay was working 2 days a week in her 70s when she received a letter for a fabricated debt of almost $65,000. Now you got to think that's a lot of money for one person. She was one of the scheme's victims and had to take a stand. I never earned that much money. How could I owe that much money? So they were basically hitting her for more money than what she even earned, which is outrageous. Some who received debt letters took their own lives, like Kathleen Madwick's only child, Jared, a few weeks shy of his 23rd birthday. Outrageous that they talk about it like this. It's been uncovered numerous opportunities to stop the scheme in its tracks, including before it began. In November 2014, legal advice from the Department of Human Services said a debt recovered raised using the Department of Human Services proposed a process of income averaging may not be derived consistently with the legislative framework. In other words, they tried to build a construct, a way to legally do this. It didn't exist and they went forward anyway, given the lack of legality to this. So understand that, and that they acted with malice. So there were, of course it was malice. They were trying to make $8 billion in savings, and you were the target of that. You were a target of every little drop that they were going to get. See, now it's outrageous to think that we're in this time where this is like considered the normal thing to do. You know, like it's fine to do this to low social and economic people, but it's not fine to do it to people that are earning three. It's not fine to make people that do have the means pay the appropriate taxes. Okay, so in early 2015, an executive minute to the Social Services Minister, Scott Morrison, flagged the need for legislative change, albeit with watered down language. But by the time the proposal reached Cabinet, a sentence referring to income averaging was removed, despite that's how they accumulated these debts. I mean, they knew what they were doing. It's outrageous that we're even having that conversation. There was a lot of people that basically gave a lot of fealty to pardon me, gave a lot of fealty to this. It wasn't as if they were being genuine about this. They knew what they were doing, and they hid the notes of what they were doing. In subsequent testimony, it's learned that not only did we know that they were doing this, but it withheld documents. In 2016, 2017, presented over an opportunity to stop the juggernaut. People who received debt notices started going to the media amid a flurry of complaints by the Commonwealth Ombudsman, launched an investigation. But this inquiry has learned that DHS withheld key documents that cast doubt on the legality of the scheme during its development, and the Ombudsman allowed the department it was investigating to influence the wording of the 2017 report, which the coalition government used to defend it. See, now when an ombudsman is playing bat and ball for the LNP, is it really objective here? Like, they had every step of the way lined up for him. When we were saying jobs to the boys, they're like, outrageous. You prove it. We proved it. And now they're like, we're not going to show you the proof. Why would we show you the proof? The media is deliberately not showing you. And you have to understand that's by design. Absolutely by design. You think David Spears wants his old network Sky News to look a little bit shabby? No, he's going to want that shit show back. Of course he is. People were appealing their debts in the Administrative Appeals Tribunal and was making a growing number of decisions in favour of the recipients. Former AAT member, Emeritus Professor Terry Carney, adjudicated that the first challenges in 2017 and the debts were being calculated illegally. But that didn't stop them. They were still like, hey, we can do this. The scheme is fine. And then what they did is they went to media-friendly outlets that would easily write up and dox people that were making complaints. And the media easily took that up as the correct position to have. Okay, but the DHS chose not to appeal the findings, which meant that they were kept secret. Professor Carney said that DHS appealed and lost. The findings would have been published and potentially halted the scheme earlier. Now, remember that Bill Shorten did take this to a class action lawsuit, which ultimately branded the whole scheme illegal. And then from there, people were paid out as a result from that action. So thank you to the ALP for being such a great advocate for those in the most vulnerable position. Okay, so it would have been a lot quicker than the 3 or more years that nearly 500,000 people had to suffer, Professor Carney told the Commission in January. There was some damaging reports shelved in 2017. It needed to be remembered, but the inquiry discovered that the final version was not required by the department running it. PwC decided that they had almost finished their reporting to it, and the coalition government's like, no, we don't need it. So no one knows where that is. We're never ever going to see that bad boy, despite over $1 million being thrown at that particular report. It's not until September 2019 that the Solicitor General's advice finally saw the scheme shut down. Now, that's going to play an important role in how we view this now. Former Government Services Minister Stuart Roberts was warned continuing the scheme could amount to malfeasance in public office, a civil wrong alleging that the abuse of power, which could be used to argue class action, which is exactly what it led to. Now, do keep in mind, ALP and the LNP, it does have actual lawyers. So they knew better by the law that they learned. They absolutely knew what they were doing, and there is no fundamental way at looking at this whole scheme that they didn't know what they were doing was wholly and solely wrong. Now, you have to wonder why Rupert Murdoch would ignore that when he had headlines around the time of Robodebt, the welfare reforms are working beautifully. And now not a word. That's a little bit strange to me. No, wait a minute. Does that track with him calling January 6th not an actual insurrection? Probably. Does that run with telling lies about an election that was not stolen? Absolutely. Does that mean that he thinks that he is in somehow doing great in attacking the poor? Yeah. And that's where we're at. He thinks this is completely fine behavior because no one has held him accountable. I put it to you that there should be a Murdoch Royal Commission and he should be shut down. After this hearing into the Dominion, after the lawsuit into Dominion voting systems, that's precisely what I think should happen. But that's a side note. Okay. In 2021, a federal court judge approved the settlement worth $1.8 billion to the Commonwealth, agreeing to pay back wrongly raised debts to fund compensation. Last year, the $101.7 million in compensation was shared between 380 class action members. So understand what they did. Throw in $30 million for the Royal Commission and what started the budget saving measure ended in an enormous waste of taxpayers' money. What do you know? It's a liberal rot. That's where we stand yet again. We're now facing the front lines of it, and you won't hear about it because the media is complicit with the LNP to do these atrocities. That's where we're at. So who's to blame? There's no single individual responsible, according to Darren O'Donovan, a senior lecturer of the administrative law at La Trobe University. Mr. O'Donovan is one of thousands who have watched the live stream of the commission every day. He has been following the Robodebt scandal since 2016, when some of his own students received debt letters. A couple of students came to me in tears and sat in my office, and I saw what was being done. I just taught the students that my subject, administrative law, that they were holding pieces of paper that violated every principle that I taught. Dr. O'Donovan said weighty responsibility for Robodebt lies on the public service. There is no big bad villain. Rather, across 4 years, what we see reinforcing failures. I disagree, and I'm going to politely engage that this is Morrison's baby. Right from being social services minister, ignoring all the legal advice pertaining to this particular legislation. I definitely disagree. And here's DHS just took the very flighty risk of following the advice of Scott Morrison, and even went as far as to hide reports. Departments had legal advice saying, don't do this. They have modelling which said if you do this, the debts will be overcalculated if they even exist. Despite having all the warnings, no written briefs were raised to ministers directly warning them. Now, that's not true either. They knew there was actual parts where they were like, ministers who oversaw the Robodebt have consistently used the line to defend their failure to stop it. What whichever politician it was, they circled the same themes. I did not know, and they relied on public servants to tell me about it. I don't agree. They knew wholeheartedly, and that's why they didn't table it to Parliament. They knew it was illegal right from that jump. So I disagree with him entirely on that. The Australian Public Service is under obligation to give frank and fearless advice, and the most common failure that drove all of this. Okay, and that's the irony of all this courage and strength and leadership that was on display in the Royal Commission. Was not the people who held the fancy titles and the enormous wages. Yeah, it actually was. The Royal Commission is not focused on consequences, but it may recommend a fresh investigation into people's conduct. It was political masters are also to blame. Professor Henman also said that. The ministers created a culture in which they wouldn't have wanted the legal advice. They didn't want to tell the minister what they thought the minister doesn't want to hear. Often they make assumptions about what the minister wants to know. Dr. O'Donovan said those 2 words allowed Robodebt to happen. Welfare cop. It was a phrase Mr. Morrison used repeatedly on television in 2015 as a policy was being developed. It was the way they justified it to the Australian public. But then what did they do? When they found out that they were doing something wrong, they went and gave to friendly media those docking. They were doxing them. So no, they knew. They entirely knew. That's why I disagree with him. They knew and they didn't want to stop. And that's where I'm at with it. I'm frustrated and I think that we deserve better than that. Okay, so we're going to have a look at Turnbull's testimony. And I think that this part's going to be interesting. Check this out in how he responded.
Former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull is today giving evidence at the Royal Commission into the...
Oh, internet's funny. We've had like wet weather and stuff.
Former...
Oh, it's not gonna... Okay, hold on. Give me a sec. Oh, just reload the damn thing and then we'll go from there. Okay.
Former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull is today giving evidence at the Royal Commission into the Robodebt scheme. Robodebt unlawfully recovered more than $750 million from 380,000 Australians and has been blamed for contributing to multiple suicides. Turnbull is facing questions over what he knew about the debt recovery scheme during his time as Prime Minister between 2015 and 2018. He's been asked about his confidence in then Human Services Minister Alan Tudge's handling of it all.
Well, look, Alan Tudge, I always regarded as a technocrat. You know, he was a management consultant. He had a lot of experience. I didn't regard him as being a negligent or incompetent or careless minister. But there is a WhatsApp here where you can see on the 20th of January 2017 where I say, Alan, we need a frank assessment of what the problems are and what is happening to fix them. Are you sure your department is giving you the right advice on what is happening? So, you know, I guess I was pressing him, Commissioner, to do his job.
Turnbull's testimony comes after former Government Services Minister Stuart Robert last week said he took absolute responsibility for implementing the scheme. He also admitted defending it in the media, despite knowing it could be unlawful.
No, it wasn't could be. They knew absolutely it was. But they didn't care. That was not the goal. The goal was to kick the goalposts around and make it look like everyone was bad but what they were doing. Okay, so what we're looking at here is Robodebt acting ombudsman Richard Glenn lashed by former Commissioner Holmes for agreeing with DHS and DSS rather than his own staff when writing up the Robodebt report. Glenn sided with those who investigated instead of his own staff, who were perfectly accurate. So take a listen to this 41 seconds of that assessment. Okay. Hopefully my net's good now.
It's frustrating, Mr. Glenn, because it's absolutely correct.
Yes.
And the thing that's notable about most of what you see from DHS and DSS is they never go to the act like that and look at what's permissible. But your staff actually did, and they were right.
Commissioner, forgive me, are we looking at the document that you drew our attention to, or is this the one that Mr. Scott?
Yeah, well, it's the same document that I was talking about, Mr. Scott's now talking about.
Yes.
There are a few exceptions to the fortnightly apportionment rule, and what's said there is perfectly accurate.
Yes, I accept that, Commissioner. I don't recall seeing this particular version of the text.
It's frustrating, Mr.
I never saw it. I didn't know about it. You know, that sort of language. It's all weasel away, find a way out of it, because why? You know, why would you have to be held accountable for this? So, in light of that, I think fundamentally charges need to come. Even though the Royal Commission doesn't have its final report for some time yet, I think that there does need to be criminal charges laid on people for harm. Lives were lost. This isn't like, oh, whoops, we got him. It's like, no, this is deliberate malpractice. You know, you went in there malfeasance. You went in there knowing what you were doing was wrong, and you did it anyway. Anyway, next one is Susan Lee's charity moment. She went to Parliament, and I thought, what am I looking at? This is what I was looking at, and I thought, well, a dare's a dare as long as it raises money for charity. Check it out.
With some nervousness, I give the call to the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I know at least one of the questions you're asking. And yes, this is for a dare for a very worthwhile cause. First, let me introduce my alter ego, Tina Lena Turner. And this is worth a fair bit of cash. At a cancer support fundraiser held in Griffith last Friday, my song partner, Glenn Starr from the local Triple M Breakfast, challenged the 700-strong crowd to reach a $100,000 target. But only if I took Tina to Parliament House. As any country MP will tell you, cancer can be a tougher curse in the country through the tyranny of distance. 2 years ago, I announced around $5 million from the coalition government for a new cancer centre in Griffith. Now, that money gets you the bricks and mortar, but there's always more needed for patient care, medical costs and equipment. No doubt inspired by the spirit of the occasion, the $100,000 was doubled to $200,000 by Chair of Cancer Care Foundation, Dr. Tony Noon and his family. I want to thank the incredible generosity of the Griffith and Leeton communities who made this night such an awesome success. Well, when things need doing out in the Riverina, we just get it done. Yeah. A special thanks also to you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to use Parliament to support this worthwhile cause and for your generosity in also supporting the cause. I thank the House.
Okay, so that is for the Cancer Council. But if you understand this fundamentally, even when the LNP is trying to do something good, there is a stunt involved. They're not just going to go, well, you know, we're holding a charity thing and that's that. No, it has to come with strings of a stunt. Can't Parliament House just be normal with their minute? Oh my gosh. As much as I agree with raising money for cancer, the stunts all aside, it's insane. I think it's a great cause, though. Okay. So we are looking at so on the back of the Australian economy struggling right now for the average household in terms of grocery, rent, mortgages, petrol, and they're just a few of the big items, big ticket items right now. That doesn't include income that doesn't match. The incoming doesn't match the amount that needs to go right now. And I think that this is 90% of households that are in the middle income bracket. So let's have a look at just that. Okay, so as mortgage prices have rose again, the Australian dollar plunges as rate hike divergence emerges, with ASX set to drop after 10th increase. Okay, so global markets are still feeling the impact of the rate hike, fears along the Australian dollar. This morning in Sydney, the Governor of the Reserve Bank, Philip Lowe, will speak publicly a day after the central bank raised rates the 10th month in a row. The following day, live on air. So that's where we're at. But we have more on monetary stuff. So there's that. And I think everyone's going to feel the pain of that. So if you're purchasing something from overseas, it's going to cost you more because our dollar isn't comparable to others. And let's face it, a lot of us buy stuff online. So that's going to be a hard one item. Next, we're going to talk about how a few weeks ago I brought you the story of the $5 note being put up as an Indigenous person and not King Charles. Now that in itself was a great move by ALP. Now take a look at England's response to that very thing. Okay.
Hi, Commissioner. Ellen Ransley from NCO Newswire. King Charles will not be on the next iteration of the $5 note. It emerged that this wasn't necessarily communicated with Britain before it was publicly announced. Do you think that could have been handled better? And what do you think this says about modern Australia's relationship with the monarchy?
But why should Australia tell Britain what it wants to do with its own currency when you are a realm in your own right? It's none of our business.
What do you think it says about our relationship?
That it's grown up.
Simon Gross.
Hi, Commissioner. Ellen Ransley from...
So that's, I mean, that basically says that we're done being part of the monarchy. I don't think we need to, and I think it's an odd thing that we still do it. It's a title that we just don't need to have. So as a result, I think that we need to look at fundamentally where we see Australia. I think it does need to go to another vote to see if we should remain a monarchy. I personally am not a monarchist, and I just don't have any role in it. But, you know, we'll see how it all plays out in the next few years after the voice gets put into the people. So these things take time. I think really you could dual the questions. Do you want to remain a monarchy, and do you want to voice to Parliament? I think both is one of those things like, no, I don't want to be part of the monarchy, and yes, I think we should have a voice to Parliament. Okay, Philip Lowe has again made the headlines. This time not because he rose interest rates, which he did. This is because he received a perk that none of us in the real world were able to get. Philip Lowe received price home loan for 5-bedroom house in the eastern suburbs. Nothing to see here because he's paid the loan off and the loan scheme has been scrapped. So take a listen to this, because of course it's outrageous that he gets these sorts of things and no one else does, and then he pretends like he understands people.
It weighs heavily on my heart, but at the same time we know that if we don't get on top of inflation, higher interest rates.
He uses it as a bludgeoning tool. His messaging is rubbish. When you think about it fundamentally, he knows it's rubbish. Interest rates aren't the only way to control an economy. It's just the only way he knows how to control an economy, because he's an old guard, not an actual person that understands how anyone actually lives. And my God, he needs to be gone as soon as his contract is up.
More unemployment, more pain.
Reports late today, though, that Dr. Lowe may have had significantly less pain with his mortgage, with newly uncovered documents showing he received a staff special half-price home loan from the Reserve Bank
special
to purchase his 5-bedroom house in Sydney's eastern suburbs. The bank says the loan's been paid, the scheme scrapped.
Staff special. I mean, come on. Come on. Are we not going to pretend like this is like two different systems? No. Outrageous. Of course it's outrageous. So, given that, I think it's clear where we are fundamentally with these people. They got no idea what the rest of us live like. Okay, next up, stay away from the Abbott's rhetoric of no. Turns out Dutton doesn't have a plan as to how he quite wants to tackle the rhetoric. Turns out not only doesn't he have that plan, but he doesn't have anything to back it with. So what does that mean? Ed Husick nails it perfectly. Take a listen. This is amazing. I was impressed by this.
But what we did have to deal with was Liberal and National parties who haven't used the time going into opposition to reflect, to think about doing things differently. But instead, blowing up the old Tony Abbott handbook, just doing exactly what Tony Abbott does, saying no to everything. Saying no to everything. And can I just say, on behalf of an anxious nation, Leader of the Opposition, please don't become this generation's Tony Abbott. Stay away from the swimwear. Don't be eating them raw onions. Remember the difference between repository and suppository. But what we did have to do.
And that's fundamentally where we are at with the Liberals. They don't have a plan. Dutton doesn't have anything. We're going to talk about where he is going to be for this election cycle in New South Wales. That's coming up. Next, we are going to discuss John Barilaro. This is his biggest scandal yet, the one you haven't heard of. This is so outrageous. This is so outrageous from Friendly Geordies. I can't believe that this is out there and it's not making the biggest headlines ever. I think it should, but here we go. Make this one trend. If anything that you will make trend, make it this.
Guys are going to enjoy this. You're going to enjoy it a lot. I'm serious. This is really, really good. Good for transparency, not good for the world, just to be clear. I have a few little recordings of a certain former Deputy Premier of New South Wales. Any guesses to who that would be? Yep, Sir Michael Bruxter, Deputy Premier from the 1930s. Now let me just pull out this wax cylinder to get it going.
In about 90 years, you should wait for the intro of this specific Geordies video released on the 10th of March, 2023. Geordies has another recording of a different Deputy Premier he wants to show you. You're really going to enjoy it. Yes, it's the fat greaseball himself, Mr. John Barilaro.
Oh, Sir Michael, Greaseball! I didn't expect such hateful language against my people from you.
Sorry, Geordies, I didn't realise the world got so fucking woke.
Ooh, your words, Sir Michael, not mine. Hang on, I thought you were a wax cylinder recording.
No, I'm just a bit. Padding a Geordies video that's about to play a bombshell recording set to shake up the imminent state election.
Yeah, so the actual recording I have is of John Barilaro, but before I play it, let me just give you some of everyone's least favourite thing, context. Pork barrelling is the practice of diverting taxpayer money to projects or initiatives designed specifically to win electorates that are key to winning elections, and in effect, withholding money from just as important initiatives that do not benefit you electorally. It is a massive problem with the Liberal and National parties, spending billions of dollars of taxpayer money on projects that don't stack up and depriving desperate and deserving regions of funding.
So this is how they've run it, right? The reason I need to point that one out is because Friendly Geordies wraps that up beautifully. But take a listen to what he did.
Scandal after scandal, pretty much anywhere it was possible, pork barrelling was happening. The New South Wales Independent Commission Against Corruption recently found that it could constitute a form of corruption. I did a whole video examining the question of, is pork barrelling corrupt? But if you don't want to watch it, I'll sum it up right now. Yes, it is. ICAC says so. Former Deputy Premier John Barilaro had a reputation for pork barrelling, eye-watering amounts of taxpayer funds in his efforts to win elections, even going as far as to pork barrel bushfire recovery grants, earning the nickname Pork Barilaro, a nickname that he himself used. In his defamation lawsuit against me, that was actually one of the things that I was sued by him for saying. I said that John calling himself Pork Barilaro was akin to him wearing his corruption as a badge of honour. His barristers, Sue Chrysanthu, took great issue with that characterisation, making the argument that I was deliberately taking out of context John's adoption of that nickname. Quote, he's mocking the label because he has been wrongly labelled as pork barrelling when all he is doing is helping the regions that he represents. It's, again, to anyone who reads this article, completely different to how it's portrayed and described by Mr. Shanks. Where's his corruption as a badge of honour? That's what Mr. Shanks said about call me Pork Barilaro, and that is plainly not the context of that quote. Okay, according to Sue, he wasn't electioneering. He was merely helping the regions that he represents. Let's play this recording taken well before John sued me and just before the Upper Hunter by-election.
Now, the reason I have to stop, you need to anyway when you do stuff like this because it can open you up to litigation. Okay, so the context to this is amazing. To hear it come out of his mouth, what's about to, I guarantee you've never heard anything like this. I never have. That's why I was like, how aren't we hearing about this more?
The Barilaro's National Party desperately needed to win. Keep his lawyer's quote in mind.
Once they got to hear his voice see here in the court, it actually cut through that racism.
Exactly.
Which of course, Andrew Fraser did, nurture that racism. Remember when migrants or immigrate, but he was on like, kick him out. But, if we, let's say worse scenario, we miss out, I'll tell you what, there was nothing left. There was nothing left on the field.
That's all I want.
But I'll tell you what, I reckon we'll get a swing to us, and you know what, we're going to rub it in their salt, and I can't wait to talk about Malcolm Turnbull a little bit on. You allow me on your night. You allow me on your night as you accept and are gracious. Allow me not to be as gracious.
Exactly.
Malcolm Turnbull. If I would appreciate that if you give me that little privilege.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm the one that's got to try and get to ERC and explain how I've given $100 million in the election.
Yeah. That's right.
And that's just ticking over. There's still 5 days to go. Anything can happen.
Anything can happen now.
George put in that Singleton needs a new fire station, so I think we'll be funding that this week.
Not only did you have a bypass, we tell them you won.
Yeah.
You didn't win, tell them you don't have to pay.
Yeah,
well, Gladys did that somewhere, didn't she?
Orange.
They
backfired.
Yeah. Not only is Singleton getting a bypass, you're getting one with tunnels.
Yeah, that's right, Coffs Harbour.
Yeah, I remember that.
I just went out and said, we're announcing the additional, we're going to do tunnels. not the, what was it called, the open.
Yeah.
And that would add, that's $500 million to the tab.
And I kept getting,
we're doing tunnels.
I'm sending a check.
You know why I didn't mind that? You know why I didn't mind that? Because the state only had to come up with 20%. The others is the feds.
I get phone calls from Michael McCormick saying, I got to go back to ERC on this.
But the beauty was they were going to a federal election afterwards and they would have needed it anyway. So we saved their ass.
But you know what? With all the investment in infrastructure.
I'm glad you call it investment, not pork barrel. I do appreciate that. As of course, pork barrel RO. Unbelievable.
I'm glad that you
I went there, and then it was like, okay, we're going to fund 25 million. Siobhan, can you fund $25 million? And Paul Tools office go, we've got 60 touch your. No, just need a $25 million blanket check. Is it Paul? It's majority government. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Hey, Peritage. 25 million. Oh, well, I got you. 42 million for Musselbrook Hospital, 11 million for Singleton. There's some little bloody rarest best shit, Cayuga or whatever, and then 650,000.
Oh, God.
Yeah. And you know what? We'll give them to Scone this week. We're going to give them some money for their roads, another $21 million. So, you know what?
You're not done yet, then?
Oh, God, no. There's 5 days. Oh, there's some. I'm going to give the guy that, you know, the guy that runs Rock.
This is like the 12 days of Christmas.
BlackRock?
Yeah, BlackRock.
So the Aboriginal Land Council want to build this big facility. I'm going to give them $4 billion too.
Why not?
Why not? Why not? You can have it all in New South Wales. You can have it all.
Yeah, exactly.
How nice. Those really sound like the words of a man merely helping the regions he represents.
Because they were going to a federal election afterwards and they would have needed it anyway. So we saved their ass.
But you know what? With all the investment in infrastructure.
I'm glad you call it investment, not pork barrel. I do appreciate that. As of course, pork barrel RO.
Ooh, better be careful not to take that out of context. After all, the judge, Justice Rares, appeared to agree with Barilaro's arguments and awarded Barilaro damages from Google based on my apparently defamatory claim that Barilaro calling himself Pork Barilaro was akin to him wearing his corruption as a badge of honour. Google's denial that the matters complained of conveyed the imputations which Mr. Barilaro alleged was unjustifiable. Each imputation was as plain as day. Mr. Shanks repeatedly called Mr. Barilaro corrupt throughout the matters complained of. In the Bruz video, he propounded that, for example, he wears his corruption as a badge of honour.
I'm glad you call it investment, not pork barrel. I do appreciate that. As of course, pork barrel RO.
I think it would be wise if someone referred this clip to the Independent Commission Against Corruption.
Yeah, that's exactly what should happen. And yet, here we are still making these weird discussions about how corruptly they acted. We know Friendly Geordies is the right one in this case.
Although Justice Rares thought even daring to call out Barilaro's pork barreling was distressing enough to award the Deputy Premier hundreds of thousands of dollars, it might be good to get a second opinion. Pretty amazing to me that you can win a defamation suit over someone calling you out for pork barreling and at the same time boast about pork barreling and then deny you were boasting in the lawsuit. I guess you can have it all in New South Wales. You can have it all.
You can have it all in New South Wales. You can have it all.
Yeah, exactly.
Paul Tools office go,
That's a sign that John Barilaro may be in more trouble than what he realises. This job in New York fell through and a fair few other opportunities for John Barilaro. I think that he was stupid to make an enemy with Friendly Geordies when you think about it, because we know that you can't go after. He was making more headlines than the mainstream media. He was getting more clicks and views than most could. So if you can go to the Friendly Geordies Facebook page and share that one around and make it well known exactly who Pork Barilaro is, I'm going to actually continue to say it, because that's exactly what he did, pretending like he's a good character male that was acting in with the grace and dignity of an MP. For the people is just not how it was. Okay, so the next one up. New South Wales is heading to an election. As the time ticks over to that election, it appears that Monster Peter Dutton hasn't made a proper appearance. Mr. Dominic Perrottet's campaign launch started this week, but Mr. Dutton is not set to make an appearance. Now, that's going to be an interesting caveat as we see Anthony Albanese make numerous trips to New South Wales and shake hands with the opposition leader, Chris Minns, and go around the state and help out his counterpart in the election. Now, that's going to be an interesting issue because he doesn't appear to really want it to hold on, I'm trying to share it. Peter Dutton's been absent for a while. So earlier we spoke about how he's adopted the campaign of the Just Say No to Everything campaign, like Tony Abbott. Like Tony Abbott, he was asked to stay away because it was considered toxic to turn up to elections. And the reason for that is because they're just not well liked. New South Wales is hanging on like by the bare threads. Now, if New South Wales can get over the line and that turns into a red state, I would hope that that wakes up the Liberals that are all this dog whistling that they do in terms of just outrageous stunts that they pull and the rorting that they do. It might actually flip them around as a party. But again, I always wish for too much and never get what I need from it, any of it. Federal opposition who trails the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese in opinion polls is not in the list of party dignitaries expected at the launch. The federal opposition leader, Peter Dutton, will not attend the official campaign launch this weekend, and he's unlikely to be seen during the frantic final 2 weeks leading up to the New South Wales election. The minority coalition government seeks to hang on to power for a 4th term in New South Wales. Dutton has been a notable absentee on the campaign trail. He also was in the recent South Australian election. So keeping that in mind, he's just not popular. There's no way of putting it. He's just not a popular guy. Since November last year, Dutton has made only one media appearance in Sydney at a press conference alongside the independent Fairfield Mayor, Frank Carbone, while visiting the city of the funeral of Cardinal George Pell, which is a disgraceful thing to rock up to George Pell's funeral. So Peter Dutton is appearing at things that he shouldn't, but won't turn up to the things that he should, like a campaign launch for the New South Wales Liberals. This is a sign that they can see the festering sore that is the monster Peter Dutton, which means to me what is happening with the what we're going to talk about a little bit after this is Josh Frydenberg and his political ambitions. So given that, I think Peter Dutton is in a bad position. I don't think he can stay on as opposition leader. He's trailing too far behind Anthony Albanese, and not even his state counterparts even want anything to do with him. So I think that that's going to fundamentally show out that he's just not popular. Okay, so the next one that we're going to talk about is Bruce Lehman. So he is the allegedly raped Brittany Higgins. Now, I have to put it like that for legal reasons. It doesn't matter what my personal beliefs are. For an online thing, I have to put it that way because he was not convicted of the crime. Turns out Network 10 and News Corp are working together to piece together his actual guilt in the crime. Because Bruce Lehman decided to sue Network 10 and News Corp Turns out that this second bite of the apple, when he'd already gotten away with a very, very awful crime, seems to be not a great move, because now they're doing a reconstruction of that very crime. Okay, Network 10 and News Corp seek to prove Liberal Party staffer Bruce Lehman raped his then colleague Brittany Higgins. In defense against defamation claim, Mr. Lehman launched defamation action against Network 10 and News Corp for their coverage of the rape allegations. Both companies filed defenses with the federal court Tuesday night, joining with journalist Lisa Wilkinson, who is seeking to prove the allegations true as part of her own defense. So this might be the part where Bruce has bitten into a very rotten apple to seek funds as a, in part, if you looked at the trial where police were leaking things about Brittany's condition. There was Linda Reynolds that was leaking things, and then she tried to intimidate Miss Higgins. Like, there was a lot that was stacked up against her. And then when Brittany's health started to decline, they reported on that too when she was hospitalized as a result. So to me, this whole thing stunk three ways from Sunday. Justice was not served in this case, and there's a lot of issues. But Bruce wasn't about to let sleeping dogs lie. He was stupid enough to go say, well, I can just sue. Now, this is going to end the same way it does every time one of these people decides, hey, I'm just going to sue the media. It ends with the egg on their face. Then they rehash the old debate of if they did it, didn't they do it? And then goes one step further. Now the network sets out to go, I think he did it, and I'm going to show you how we did it. Wow. Bruce, buddy, if I could advise you at any point about what you did, this is to do with Peter Dutton. Oh, wow. The cowardly, spineless, and callously inhumane political psychopath Peter Dutton hasn't got the intestinal fortitude to face the rising anger of delusional New South Wales Welshmen. Now, I was raised in New South Wales, so I understand how people are feeling there, particularly around the Tamworth region, and sadly Barnaby still holds his spot. There are some very doggedly transfixed people to them at the same time. So I think that I agree with this comment completely, and the non-stop wasting and rorts has major consequences to why he can't turn up to the election campaign. Absolutely. And this also brings up how federal politics helped Bruce Lehman get away with what he did, and how turning up to George Pell's funeral is also another. So they seem to be very, very okay with certain abuses. Okay. Court documents outline the network's defense said it will rely upon the substantial imbalance of power between Mr. Lehman and Ms. Higgins while they worked in the office of then Defence Minister Linda Reynolds. The lawyers for Tennant claimed Mr. Lehman was sexually attracted to Ms. Higgins and attempted to kiss her in the days leading up to the alleged rape. The network's defense will rely on Mr. Lehman's lies and inconsistencies and consciousness of guilt, including the deferring of explanations for going to Parliament House the night of the alleged rape. Mr. Lehman also mixed 6 calls from then girlfriend that night, which network refers to as consciousness of guilt by having raped Miss Higgins. Ten will defend its publishing of Miss Higgins' allegations as being part of public interest, because Mr. Lehman's role as a senior ministerial advisor. The defence also details multiple meetings between 10 journalist lawyer and Miss Higgins before the interview. 10 reasonably believed that the information included in the matters were true and any information could not be independently verified. So Mr. Lehman, it goes on to say about Mr. Lehman rejecting an interview, which is absolutely that person's right. It's good to note that when you are facing serious criminal charges, it is not advisable by any lawyer that you make any public statement in regards to that. That does not prove any innocence or guilt in relation to that particular matter. Okay, so hold on. So next we're going to look at the Hillsong saga. We've been talking about for a while if Hillsong has engaged in levels of fraud. Okay, so here we go. Charities watchdog to review fraud allegations made in Parliament at Hillsong. Charities watchdog will review allegations made in Parliament that Hillsong Church misused donation of its members. Independent MP Andrew Wilkie used parliamentary privilege to accuse Hillsong Church of breaking financial laws in Australia and around the world relating to fraud, money laundering and tax evasion. Mr. Wilkie claimed that tens of thousands of leaked financial records and documents, including credit card statements, details of designer gifts and the use of private jets, shows a misuse of church funds and lavish spending. The Tasmanian MP said some of the documents show former leader Brian Houston, who stepped down from the role last year, was treating private jets like Ubers and used the church money for various trips, costing a total of $179,000 in 1 3-month period. The Charities and Not-for-Profit Commission confirmed on Friday afternoon it would investigate the allegations. Hillsong has stated publicly that it isn't fully cooperating with the regulatory authorities. ACNC Commissioner Sue Woodward said, now do keep in mind that this is the church of Mr. Morrison. Now, he can claim that he hasn't been there for 10 to 15 years, but there are photos that prove that's just not accurate. Want to try that one again? Mr. Morrison, your buddy's in trouble. Jason Clare, who sits in the Cabinet, told Channel 7 that the allegations were serious and should be looked at. The nature of the allegations have been put out there before the Parliament today, and the nature of the response from the church, it seems the sort of thing that the tax office needs to take seriously. The Australian Tax Office told the ABC they were unable to comment. Standing next to 2 large stacks of folders of documents, Mr. Wilkie claimed that there were details of 4 members of the Houston family and their friends spending $150,000 of the church money on a luxury retreat in Cancun, Mexico. Mr. Wilkie also alleged that the head of the Hillsong, Phil Dooley, spent tens of thousands of dollars on business class flights for him and his daughter. Mr. Wilkie claimed that the church donations were also used to pay more than $1 million a year in royalties to Hillsong musicians like Brian Houston's son, Joel. Now, as that becomes known, understand that these are allegations, and using parliamentary privilege is a banner in which to do it, which means that you cannot sue for making those claims. Mr. Wilkie is fully understanding that, which is why he hasn't stepped out of Parliament to make the very same claim, because these churches are big and powerful. But we will see what comes out of it in terms of the tax office. But do keep in mind that that does not mean that the allegations are not true, but it doesn't mean that they are true. That doesn't mean that there's a chance that they're either true or untrue. We'll see how the evidence falls as it may. Okay, my words are all crazy on me today. So we got 2 stories left. I need to talk about Josh Frydenberg. Turns out he's not done. He's looking at whether he will run again in the 2025 election. Turns out Mr. Frydenberg thinks that he still has ambitions to be Prime Minister. And as a subsequent note of that, he thinks he can win and he thinks he'd be popular. But first, he needs to recognise he even lost his own seat. And honestly, he's not even liked where he is. I don't think he'd run well on a national platform, much like Peter Dutton. So that's bunkus. I don't see a point to that story. Okay, so the last one of the evening. We have the ALP and the Greens are petitioning for a 4-day work week. This collaboration has stated that where people still receive a weekly income, that remains the same for doing more hours over the 4 days and then having the rest a 4-day weekend. Essentially what we should be doing, because our birth rates are too far down and our economic status is not meeting the moment for this either. So there are multiple reasons why it is a good idea. But let me show you exactly where we're at with that. Committee members supported a suite of policies that would radically adjust Australia's work-life balance. Australia should trial a 4-day work week, full pay, and more than double pay parental leave at 52 weeks, according to recommendations backed by Labor and Green senators. The Senate Work and Care Committee report on Thursday calling for a suite of policies that would radically adjust the work-life balance to make more time for care and responsibilities to boost quality of life. The committee, chaired by Green Senator Barbara Pocock, backed by many of the Greens' industrial relations policies, including a right to disconnect from work by not answering phone calls or emails outside work hours. The unanimous report received support from Labor and coalition senators. Although its recommendations go much further than the official government policy, and both major parties warned of the cost implementations of its measures. The Albanese government has committed to increase paid parental leave to 26 weeks by 2026 and wants to pay superannuation, PPL, and other key recommendations of that report. The committee proposed to the Fair Work Commission should review the operation of a 38-hour work week, including whether to introduce stronger penalties for longer work hours or work health and safety rules, prevent a workload becoming a health hazard. Now, do keep in mind that your work week is a hazard. To some people, this can drastically affect their mental health. So do understand that there is a lot of benefits to a 4-day work week in some of these instances, and to not affect the decrease in living lifestyles. So with all that being said, I think it is a wonderful initiative that we all should be looking at seriously. While it would be a more costly in terms of what happens economically, you will see benefits all around. So you will see things like people that will be able to go to work more often, healthier, and in a better mindset, better birth rates, which creates better economy in the long term. Short term, it'll feel like a squeeze. Long term, it'll feel like a blessing. Truly, I do believe that. Okay, that wraps up everything tonight. I hope you had a wonderful show, and I hope that you join me for the same time, same place next week. I will see you then. Thank you. Bye.